Welcome to 101 Piece. I'm your professor, Dr. Zombrain, and I got cola, just like Frankie. And today we're going to be going over the Giant Invasion arc. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I know this is going to be a little bit of a different one. We haven't really started yet, but this weekend I'll be planning on starting to actually go through the series like I planned on it. But with the current area in the manga coming to an ending point, I figured it'd be very important to try to piece together all of our ideas. So that's what we're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over the Giant Invasion arc. If you're caught up with the manga, that makes sense. If not, spoilers ahead. This is going to be going over through chapter 1106 to the current chapter 1118 as of the time of recording this. I know 119 spoilers and stuff are out, but we're not going to be going over that. We're going to be ending on 118 for a very important reason, just because it ends on a very important note. But we'll get there. I'm not going to spoil anything that happens super later on until we get to that point when we go through the timeline. So we're going to have 3 points in this episode. We're going to be going over the timeline. So we're going to go over like a little bit of review of every chapter. Now, again, in future episodes, say that we went back in time, I would make sure I'd put that first. This has been a pretty symmetrical, one point next after the other. But, we're going to go over the timeline and kind of review everything. And then we're going to go over some lore drops. So I got some information that we got in those. We might go a little bit in depth, have a little bit of a discussion on it. And then finally, we're going to do an overview/review. So we're going to go over, hey, this is everything that happened, a little bit more detail on some certain points. Because, this chapter, not too much happened. So I'm going to mention it, and then we're going to go more in depth on the deeper ones. But then we're going to kind of review and figure out some key points that are happening throughout and kind of connect all the pieces. So let's get straight into the timeline. The Giant Invasion arc timeline. As you can see, there's a lot of things here. I know it's probably hard to read, but I'm going to pull it up and write it on the screen. And we're also going to have a manga, one individual manga panel, because, copyright and stuff, but it's going to be the main focus of the chapter. The way I have it set up is there's different colors. And then there's a few key points to each chapter. So we're going to start off, right here, red. It's going to stand for Luffy, right? And then we have Vega and the Giants. And then we're going to go over it. We got green for Zoro, we have purple for the Elders, and then we have blue for everything else, and Jinbei, because Jinbei's kind of important too. So let's get into chapter 1106, where the key points are Vegapunk and the Giants. So we're going to start off chapter 1106, or I'm just going to say 106 from now on, You guys know we're in the thousands. And it's going to start off with the first major point that happens is Vega gets hit by Saturn. So again, quick little recap. Saturn, one of the 5 Elders, has turned demon mode, is attacking. Straw Hats are trying to get off of Egghead. That's all that's happened so far. So, Vegapunk gets hit, impaled with one of the legs from Saturn. So, he's hit, and he is hurt. Then we're going to move on to Bonnie. Jewelry Bonner, who's kind of freaking out a little bit, but then Luffy goes back into Gear 5, because he was not, or he was, it's kind of hard to keep track of when Luffy is and isn't turning into Gear 5 in this section. But this time Bonnie sees it, and she realizes that is the Sun God. But at the same time, we also move over to a panel where we can see the Iron Giant is reacting to the beat of Liberation. And then finally, we end the chapter off with Dory and Bragi showing up, the Giants. So, the Giants have officially arrived, and that's why we're going to call it the Giant Invasion arc, because this is where it starts. Obviously, there's more before, and there's going to be some after, but that's what the section will be. Chapter 1,001, I'm just kidding, 107. 107. It's green, because the main points are going to be Zoro and Blackbeard. So we're going to start off the chapter with other giants showing up. We see the people from Water 7, or I should say Enies Lobby, and a few others that seem a little familiar, but a lot of new ones. It's the entire crew. It's not just the 3 or 4 that we've hung around. It is a giant crew. The pirates. Giant pirates. Then the next key point to remember is Zoro and Lucci are fighting. So they've already started fighting a little bit, but they're kind of, clashing back and forth a bit. Then Bonnie notices and says she was looking for Nika. And then specifically, and I quote, "I want to hit him with a rubber punch like yours. Show me how to do it." Then Luffy goes ahead and punches Saturn. He punches Saturn pretty hard, too. While this is happening, Kizaru is trying to go on the offensive, and Sanji actually pulls up and blocks his light attack. So this is a pretty crazy feat from Sanji, not for power scaling, just in general skill. Like, he is able to block him now. The last time we saw, other than Luffy, someone block Kizaru was Rayleigh, Dark King Rayleigh. So this is really important to show that the crew, not just the captain, is stepping up and having that power boost. Then finally, we end with the Blackbeard pirates arriving, which is just crazy. And we also see that the one, I don't know how to pronounce her name, the one with the nine-tailed mythical Zoan that can copy people has copied Saturn. And from what I understand, we're not too sure, we think she can copy their devil fruit as well. So she now has this demon devil, whatever it is, whatever Saturn has. Then finally, we end the chapter off with Caribou. You remember that guy? You know, he's been around for years at this point. Since all the time skip, he's been around. So he actually shows up, and he tells them about everything, about the ancient weapons. It's like, take me to Blackbeard. I know what's up. So we don't know where they went. We have not seen them since. But that is something to keep in the back of your mind. So chapter 108 is where it really gets picked up. So we start off with the giant saving Frankie's crew. So right now, everyone's scattered all over the place. We have some other non-importance and some Vegapunks over here. We have Luffy and some of the giants over here fighting Saturn. But we also have Nami and Usopp over here on top of the Saturn. But then we also have Brook going over here. They're scattered. So Frankie's crew, which includes a whole bunch of people, is rescued by the giants. But then, this is where it gets crazy, Vegapunk is actually shot by Kizaru. Sanji's not able to block this one, so he's officially been hit twice. Remember, he has a huge brain, his body ain't that large, so like 2 blasts from a thing that's like, imagine like 2 holes this big. That's not, you're probably down for the count. Now, Luffy sees this, and he's a little annoyed. So this is gonna be the scene for this chapter. This is one of the coldest scenes, and it shows that Gear 5 can be serious. Luffy single-handedly is holding Kizaru fully in his fist, and holding back Saturn in the other. He is fully holding them. But here's where it really gets started. Vegapunk's message starts. We don't know what's up, but he says, "Hello, world." So chapter 109 isn't too crazy. A lot of these chapters have been reaction shots, and we're not going to go over that because there's not too much story. There's stuff that we can talk about, but that's not important. We're talking about just the baseline lore right now of One Piece. So that's pretty much all the chapter. Everyone's reacting because he says you will have 10 minutes to set up, then I will start going into everything. Like, so he's talking about making he's just kind of rambling about, trying to waste time so everyone can get set up to watch and listen around the world. He wants everyone to be able to hear this because this is groundbreaking. Now that's cool. What's really important, and why I wrote one word for this chapter, is at the end of the chapter, remember when Saturn was summoned, he had this circle. We see 4 more huge clouds of smoke, and we can only assume the rest of the elders have been summoned. Chapter 110 starts off strong. The rest of the 5 elders have been summoned, and they are together in one huge double panel. From what I've seen, after the research that I did, I haven't read and checked, it looks like this is the first double-paged panel, right? Where it's not like word boxes, it's not, here's a small side panel, it is a double-page spread since the creation of the Grand Fleet. So it's been a while. So, here's the 5 elders, and Ethan, one of them, just goes straight to work. He is starting to chop off a connection point in the neck of the pacifistas, knocking them out and inhabilitating them. Marcus, the bird, does some aerial recons. He's able to fly up and he's checking the surroundings, trying to figure out what's going on in the situation. Because yes, they kind of been paying attention through this responder snail that's Vegapunk has sent out, but also through Saturn. But now they are actually there, so they're trying to figure out what's going on. Zoro finally lands a big blow on Lucci after Sanji says he's a liability. So this is where Sanji's like, Jinbei, go get him. He's a waste of time. He's a burden. And Zoro is just like, no dog, you're the burden, and just clicks on Demon Hunter mode. And then finally, Luffy is saved from Jupiter, which is the sandworm, by Dory and Broggy. So yes, it's getting very crazy, but again, I'm just gonna show this panel one more time. This might be one of my favorite panels of the entire series, honestly. Like, it's insane. 111 is just as insane. We started off with Jinbei catching up to Lucci, or catching up to Zoro, who was fighting Lucci, but Lucci isn't down for the count yet, and this is probably from that passion that Luffy gave him in his fight in Enies Lobby, how he would not go down, and Lucci's like, nah. But we all know Lucci ain't no Luffy, so Jinbei throws some water bricks at him and knocks him off his feet. So then, they start running off to join the rest of the crew. Marcus then comes talk to Lucci to try to get an idea of the situation. Then he flies off. The Giants talk to Luffy and explain, wow, you look really familiar to a god from their tales back in Elbaf, which is obviously the sun god Nika. So, you know, we can obviously tell they know something and they're familiar with this. And that's a very key point that we see throughout all of this. Their laughter, or Luffy's laughter in Gear 5 is very contagious, especially to the Giants, and we see that at the later chapters of what's been going on. Then next, Workery screams Luffy's scars off. I feel like this is very important because it just shows Luffy's defense. His scar, like his X from when he got attacked by Akainu, and like when he cut his face, just flew off. Same with his eyeballs, and then he just kind of put them back on. But this is not my favorite panel, but this is probably my favorite Gear 5 moment. He takes a tree, he chips it like a wood chipper, and then he plays baseball with venom shots. So that's pretty cool. Luffy plays some baseball. York meets Marcus. So York, the Vegapunk satellite that betrayed everyone and wanted to be a celestial dragon, meets Marcus, one of the 5 elders, in his beast form, and she's pretty startled and taken aback. But then she also proclaims the situation to him in a little bit more light and explains that there's a transponder snail somewhere on this island that is projecting the message. Then finally, we end the chapter off with yet again the Iron Giant doing something. He hasn't done much. He just moves. That's it. He just moves. 112. So we're really getting here. We're about here right now. So we've gone through all this. We're at 112. My 2 points here are Snail and Luffy. So we start off with York explaining, like I said in the last chapter, goes in a little bit more about the Transponder Snail. But then also in this chapter, one of the Vegapunks, Edison, is working on getting Thousand Sunny down to the water safely. Next, Luffy just kind of throws a full building in Gear 5. But then after this, he actually loses his Gear 5 power, and he goes back down to base. Now, we all know what happens when Luffy does this. He just turns like an old man, he's exhausted, everything. He's just dying. And the Giants see this, and they're very confused. It's like, yo, what happened? Why are you an old man now? But then what's really cool about this, and something that we're kind of begs some confusion in the community, and I'm still not super sure, he actually throws a red rock at him. At Workery. So Luffy can still use Conqueror's Haki, right? Like, that's kind of been a thing. It's like, where's the Conqueror's Haki at? But he still can use it. He used red rock. However, Luffy burns his hand. So that means Workery's defense and hockey mastery or ability or whatever is top tier, which makes sense. He's a 5-outer. He is one of the top tiers of the verse. Easily. But just to show a red rock that did not Kaido on his feet, instead burns Luffy. Luffy's the one that got hurt from this attack. Shows the strength of the Gorosei. They surpass all of our thoughts and all our expectations on strength. Finally, Marcus arrives to a transponder snail and the lab. Like, he enters. So, yeah. 113. So this one's in blue. We got Robin and Bonnie. Now, before we start, here's the cover panel. This is such a cool cover panel. It's not, like, story-related. It's not the cover art. Which, by the way, while this has been going on, Yamato from Wano has been going on a quest, you know, just exploring. She just, I forget quite the timeline of that. We'll go over that when I get to the Egghead review, like when the anime gets caught up and stuff, but that's been happening. Nothing too important to the main lore right now. But this cover just blew my mind. This is just me gassing Oda, like, this is just brilliant, and how everyone kind of has their own piece. It kind of makes sense that Luffy's king and everything like that, so that's really cool. But anyway, now let's get to the actual chapter. The first major point and what Marcus actually saw was, this is actually the reveal of Vegapunk's noggin. His head is massive. Massive. So this is Punk Records. This is what all the satellites have been connecting to up here. This huge head, this huge area. Like, I almost wonder, like, what this would look like in server size in modern standards. Now, we see some other islands, right? Just at every chapter, we're seeing different islands, going back to other islands, and they're reacting to Vegapunk's message. But there's an island I want to specify that we actually see, and that is the island that Chopper saw during the time skip, where they kind of see, like, cavemen. They're actually paying attention to the message. They know about Vegapunk. So this shows just their intellect and how much smarter they are. And it also shows just the vast variety in the One Piece world. We see this with Vivi explaining it very early on during the Alabasta arc, how different, because of the Grand Line, because of all the weather and phenomenon, there is so many different cultures that not only evolve rapidly, but stay stagnant over thousands of years. And that's kind of what it looks like here. They still look like cavemen. They're not super advanced, yet they are, because they have transponder snails, but they're also very advanced in the medical field. So again, I just thought this would be very important to point out. Now, we actually see Bonnie go into a giant form, her distorted future. Now, during this, we hear some stuff from Vegapunk, and this is where we're going to go a little bit more in depth into the lore section, but the main points that are happening in this chapter. He says he's committed 2 grave sins. His message will start when his heart stops, and he wants people to choose. He does not want to infer that one side is evil or one side is good. Now, after this, you know, all the outers are obviously furious, and they don't know what he's about to talk about. He can talk about anything, and they don't know what he knows. That's why some of this started, and why Vegapunk wanted to leave, because he was actually, Cypher Pole Zero was assigned to assassinate him, because he was researching the poneglyphs. So, Robin actually hears the voice, and realizes that Saturn and Okainu were the ones responsible for Ohara. Saturn's voice actually sounds familiar, so Saturn was at Ohara, which is a mind-blowing revelation. Does make sense, because he actually is complaining, or maybe not that he was there, but the voice definitely seemed familiar. We're not sure where, but he was explaining about how Akainu let Robin through his fingers, and that he can finally put a stop to her now, Saturn. And finally, this is one of the first major reveals of the message. The world as we know it is going to sink into the sea. Alright guys, we're almost there at the end of the timeline. we're back up to 1,114, and this is where we start the message is really taking off, and we're getting a lot of lore drops. So like I said, we're going to explain that a little bit more in the review and overview section of this episode. But we're going to start off with, we're seeing some of the Marines, and they're very confused. They don't know what's going on. Now, we would think, so this just shows how there's a big level of knowledge when it comes to a lot of these different groups. And I want to talk about another group later, and their reaction. The next big thing is we actually see Mocktown, the town where Melanie was one shot. You know, that great town is laughing. They don't believe him, which is really funny and ironic based on the town, that they don't care. And it's gonna show they're going to suffer the consequences. They're gonna have very harsh karma. The next thing, to show that Vegapunk is telling the truth, he knew about the earthquakes that happened earlier that day. But, remember, he claimed that this message started when his heart stopped, so he's dead. So this is pre-recorded. So he knew about this. Then he talks about his first grave sin, and I love the chapter name, Wings of Icarus. His first grave sin was he flew too close to the sun. That's the title, and what this is in the chapter, and this will be the scene for the chapter, we see the Mother Flame for the first time. Now, I want to point out two main points with that real quick. S108 and A and MU. So we don't know quite what it is. I'll talk about that later. But start to talk about the Void Century and what happened so many years ago. So again, he's starting to reveal some big information. However, the main point I want to bring about is one of the Celestial Dragons, one that we actually met in Sabaody Archipelago, hears it and doesn't understand what's going on. So, I understand the Marines, but it looks like not all the Celestial Dragons know what's going on. Again, we'll talk about it later in the episode. So, he reveals that he has been trying to decipher the poneglyphs, which is a grave sin. That's what started and destroyed Ora, and what Robin has been trying to do, and why she is such a threat to the world government. Why she had a larger bounty than not just Luffy, but I think Big Mom at the age of 9 or 8, like a very young age. Not because of strength, not because she's a menace, just because she can read the poneglyphs. And finally, this is where we get some big lore. Joy Boy name drop, and the reveal that he was the first pirate on the seas. 115. The weapons. And AC and WG. So, it starts off with the War of the Ancient Kingdom, AC, and the 20 nations or the world government. So we reveal that that's a thing, that's been happening. And that's where the creation of the world government started, was an alliance against the ancient kingdom. Now, the world has already been altered, and the water has risen 200 meters, which is 656 feet or so. So I have two things, especially for the American people, but even if you're outside America, you probably can recognize. The Washington Monument is 550 feet. So this is over 100 feet taller than the Washington Monument. But the one that people might know a little bit better, even if you're outside of America, is the Statue of Liberty. That's 300 feet. This is over twice the size of the Statue of Liberty. Now that's not too high, right? We have buildings that are taller than that. I'm not gonna say, oh yeah, this is taller than the Eiffel Tower, like, you know, something like that. This is the water level. Right, we know, like, in our current life, the water level rises every, like, you know, centimeter. It might go down a centimeter, to, you know, something like that. You know, it's like this much. I mean, you know, it's maybe like this much every year or something. How would you feel if the entire Eiffel Tower just rose? Do you realize how many towns, especially, like, the beaches, right? They're definitely, like, the beaches right here, and, you know, you have all these houses on stilts. It's going to keep going. It's going to be above those houses completely. Inward. Completely. So that's insane. So the reveal of the ancient weapons, we have Pluton, Uranus, and Poseidon. Pluton, Uranus, and Poseidon. And then with the reveal of the weapons, Vegapunk also makes the proclamation that technically, because those weapons are still here, the war between the ancient kingdom and the world government is still ongoing. So chapter 116 starts off pretty sad. It actually starts off with King Cobra's funeral, because as at this point, he's dead. And it also shows Igaram and some of the other people from Alabasta not just mourning, but worried because Princess Vivi's location is still unknown to the general public. Then we skip to Emu, who's currently looking at a portrait on the wall. Now, something to keep in mind is, for the most part, she only looks down. This portrait's actually up. And what we're going to assume is Lily. Now, the reason I say we're going to assume, it looks almost identical to Princess Nefertari Vivi. So, if we know that they're ancestors and, just the connections between these people, we're assuming that it's Lily. But we're not sure. Then we go back to Vegapunk. He claims that he has made the Mother Flame, but he didn't realize what it would do. He knew, he was just trying to make an energy source. We see him at the beginning of the arc proclaiming he wants to make an energy source strong enough to power the Iron Giant, but he hasn't been able to. Meaning the Mother Flame isn't strong enough, so whatever the Giant uses is insane. But then, this is where the mic drops yet again. The destruction of Lulusia. So again, that's what happened earlier in this day. The kingdom was destroyed. Sabo was unaccounted for. And this caused this water level to rise. He knew all this. But now he is proclaiming it, and the entire world knows. We actually see some people who are trying to confirm this information. It's like, hey, go check on the status of Lulusia. Because as of they know, that kingdom's completely fine. Because remember, yes, we have transponder snails. We don't just got, phones. We have to, make sure we don't have, most people aren't having transponder snails in their pockets. I mean, the Marines have a little wristwatch thing that they got to make sure it's up and inactive and everything connected. And the main source of news is a newspaper. So if it happened that same day, yeah, not everyone knows about the destruction of this kingdom yet, which is insane. And then we see that the Stratosphere and Luffy's crew and all the good guys are protected by the Iron Giant. But Vegapunk reveals something else, and that is the fact that the Roger Pirates actually did find out what happened. They know about the Void Century, about the Ancient Kingdom, about the weapons, and a little bit about Emu, probably. But then Rayleigh, we end with Rayleigh, and he's just like, don't ruin the fun for the youngsters. As always, drinking a drink at Shaki's bar. We are so close. For the second to last chapter that is currently out, 117. I got 3 pretty big things here. It starts off with we are actually catching up with Kobe. So remember, Kobe was captured by Blackbeard. But it's okay, because Garp saved him. But we still do not know the current whereabouts and, if Garp's alive or not. But here's what gets really crazy. We then skip to that same base, but Diaz Drake's there. Remember, he's actually a Navy officer. He was on a call with Kobe in Wano. So he's actually part of the Navy, part of a special team called Sword, which can kind of do their own thing. So that's pretty crazy. Then why it's green, this is crazy. Ethan, the guy that has a Kitetsu blade, then attacks this Thousand Sunny, or tries, but Zoro says, not today, and actually blocks a 5-outer solo. So not only has he blocked a dual Yonko attack, he has now blocked a full swing from one of the Gorosei, one of the 5-outers, one of the 5-outer planets, whatever you want to call them. He has blocked one of their attacks. Now this is where it gets a little crazy. The chapter is called A, That's it. That's because Vegapunk was about to reveal something massive about the will of D. For those that have the middle initial of D, you have A. And then it ends with the 5 elders who because now the Iron Giant's running around, they realize the Giant's there because they knew that was on Marish-Wall 200 years ago. So they attack it, and that's probably where the snail is, and it is. So that means the transmission has officially been ended. Right before we get the reveal or some kind of lore drop on the Will of D. So then the last chapter that's currently out, like I said, as of right now of recording this, 119, I'm not reading. The summaries are out, but I don't know if the scan's out. It's 1,118. I just have one word up there. Joy. If you've read the chapter, you know. If you haven't, go read it and then come back. But let's go over the chapter real quick. It starts off with the giant felt Joy Boy. It's like, you were here, right, Joy Boy? Like, he could sense him, and he just kind of misses him. Then we skip to the giant ship is on fire. I mean that in two ways. The giant ship, but then the giant crew, the race, their ship's on fire. It's pretty bad. But then Luffy goes into Gear 5 again. And this is what I was saying earlier. His laugh, his joy is contagious. Their ship is literally on fire, but because of how much and how free the giants are and how connected they are to the sun god, and we don't know quite how, if it's more than just a belief, they just dance. They're dancing on their ship that is on fire instead of trying to put it out. They can't. It's like, we should probably help stop this fire, but I can't just help but laugh, because the drums of liberation are just that intense to them. Now, Luffy's, Bonnie's like, hey, I want to do this too. I want to help. I want to beat these guys up. And Luffy tells Bonnie, you just gotta be free. And it ends on Joy Bonnie, where she asked for the most free future. So let's go over all the random lore tidbits that's added before we throw everything together and kind of start trying to process what's going on. Because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of confused. There's a lot that's been dropped. And it's hard to keep track of. I do read the chapters weekly live on stream, so make sure you subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when I do that. But I know for there's a few chapters, I was kind of trying to throw things together, but it was just so little that I just kind of stopped because it was just a little bit. But we're going to review it here today. Little random fact at the top first. Again, it's kind of hard to keep track of. We see about 3 Gear 5 transformations. We don't see the transformations, but Luffy turns into Gear 5 around 3 times. But I put a +1 because that was Bonnie's form. So technically, we see 4 Gear 5s in this span of the manga. So let's start with Joy Boy, because that's kind of just a quick little thing. So Joy Boy is a dude. He was the first pirate. The Iron Giant was his friend. Yeah. And then Vegapunk also proclaimed that he's not really sure if he was a good or bad guy. He was just a dude. Let's get to the Ancient Kingdom, though, because we actually do learn a little bit about this. So, obviously, they had some kind of power, and that goes to Mother Flame, right? They had some kind of power to power the Iron Giant, etc., the world government, and or the Ancient Kingdom. There's something back here. This is the Void Century, I should say, not the Ancient Kingdom versus world government. Just in this Void Century, there was some kind of power source. It was a very intense power source, though. Vegapunk actually says the world government had no choice but to go up against Joy Boy. This is really interesting, and this is why it's such a crucial part to try to really be unbiased, which I'm going to be honest, if you're watching this and you're on One Piece Twitter, you know that's impossible for most of the One Piece community. It's impossible to be unbiased. The amount of agenda stuff that I see, whether you're an Admiral agenda, Mihawk agenda, whatever, I don't care. But to keep this unbiased is practically impossible. But that's what Vegapunk is trying to do, and that's what this last point is. He says this is a war of ideologies. One side is he's trying to make people choose. he does not want to infer and say, I think they're doing this, because that might lead to the side of, this side is right, this side is wrong. He is trying to only give us the facts, and that's why the stuff was all over the place. This is only the little bit that he can know. Remember, information is illegal to learn, so it's not exactly easy to find a full map of the history or a full encyclopedia. He has to go over all the world, go into this poneglyph and get this poneglyph to kind of throw everything together, right? But this is, like I said, this is a battle of ideologies, which is just so fascinating because we don't know either ideology so far. And this is something that's going to be very hard for me and a lot of you to do, but I think we do have to do it. We have to really beg the question, was Joy Boy good? Now, that's not me saying the world government or the Celestial Dragons are good. That's a completely different point. Celestial Dragons are terrible human beings, slavery, this and that. It's terrible. But the original, who was in the wrong? That's a very important question we have to ask. So now for the final point. I do want to quickly mention before we also hear like kind of a name drop for the Alliance, which is the original 20 Kingdoms. So obviously it wasn't called the World Government, it was called the Alliance back then. But now it's time for 101 Piece review. So we're going to kind of just ramble about and try to figure out and discuss some of these points. I want to say though, every week when a new chapter comes out, I watch the Grand Line review. I'm going to leave his link down in the description. That's kind of where I got an idea to do this. Not this just episode, just this idea. But I watch him every time, and a lot of my ideas do kind of come from him, but especially his second part videos where he does. He goes over the basic review of every chapter, and then he asks the community what they think, and then he answers those questions or talks about them. And a lot of my ideas and theories come from that. If you want to know some of that, I do have a live stream like Q&A, and I answer and I go through a lot of One Piece, because I do know a lot about One Piece. I know too much. I've watched and I consume too much One Piece media. But there's just kind of a lot of unknown, right? Some of the main points that we've really discussed so far are kind of trivial, and it kind of feels like Vegapunk's message was a little lacking at sometimes. It's like a lore drop, it's like, we kind of already knew this, but I want to mention some stuff that I saw from his videos to bring questions. So one of the first things I want to bring up is the world is going to sink. The world's going to sink. And I want to bring this up because we actually, it's kind of funny because that brings a lot of question on what's going to happen to a lot of different parts of the world. We have an idea that Luffy will destroy the Grand Line to set Fishman Island free, this and that, right? Like, you know, create Doll Blue. There's a lot of things that can come from that. But what's going to happen to Fishman Island? If the world's going to sink, what's going to happen to Fishman Island? Like, is it going to sink too? Is it going to float to the top? So that's a very important question we have to ask. Because again, remember, if this is a normal island, right? That little scribble's a normal island. This is the Grand Line, or Red Line. This is a middle hole at the bottom, and this is Fishman Island. Like, it's large, don't get me wrong, but in the grand scheme of the One Piece planet, it's not. So what's going to happen to that? But it's also funny because it shows that the Roger pirates were preparing, and we see them all about. We see Crocus in a whale. Crocus is in a whale. Like, he is prepared to submerge. Like, he has a house and everything living in there. So he's good. I said ship cat. We see Rayleigh is a ship coder. So the Roger pirates knew what was going on, and we see that, and they prepared for the situation. Now, they weren't sure when it was probably going to happen, right? But they're prepared. So that's kind of very interesting to think about. And it also begs the question what the other Roger pirates are currently doing at this point. Obviously, we know what some of them are doing, Shanks and Buggy, but they weren't there, so they don't know about the mystery that we know of. We still do not know if they were told, if they, like, whatever. I don't think they know, but who knows? So the world's gonna sink. Trying to think, there's so many different points that we can talk about, but obviously that's not here. And again, all of these chapters, I want to say, I read live, and I discussed as it was happening. Let's go through the timeline real quick then, because I do want to end on Jewelry Bounty, and I want to discuss that a little bit, and some stuff that the Grand Line review, and just some other comments that I've seen on YouTube and Twitter. So, obviously the Giant has been happening, this and that. We see just Luffy going crazy in Gear 5. Because there's some stuff I did want to discuss. So in the Marcus talks to Lucci, we actually do see Lucci has actually gained a little bit of humanity, because he actually asks Marcus to rescue Kaku, who as of this point is still in a bubble with Stutzy. So that's kind of interesting to see. And this also brings up the cover stories, which most people I don't think have read or really remember, and that's something that I'm going to be going over when I go through my series. I'm going to make sure I cover the cover stories as they're happening. And what happened was, after Water 7 and Ennis Lobby, they actually rescue Kaku, the rest of the CP0, or CP9, and they save him. And because Kaku was so close to him, and, like, etc., they actually have some kind of connection to each other. So, in this really dark world where he is assigned as a child assassin, Lucci does kind of have one friend, and that's Kaku. So that's really cool to see some character growth there. So, we keep going. So, chapter 1114. I want to talk about the Celestial Dragons and the Marines and their acknowledgement of the Void Century. Centuries with a C. I knew that. I am now really mad. The other thing I can... Nope. Cool. So, Celestial Dragons and Marines and the Void Century. So, as I stated, in that chapter, 1114, some of the world government agents and the Marines are very confused about what's going on, because they had no idea. This is a first for them. But then later in the chapter, we also see the Celestial Dragons, or at least one of them, here's the picture, is very taken aback. And this is very confusing, but also kind of makes sense. Now, we do also see a Kainu, who's currently Fleet Admiral, so that we can know of. That is the second highest position in the entire world government, in the Navy, apart from the Five Elders, right? There's only one guy above him. And so we can assume that he knows a lot. So it's very interesting to see that he does know, but that there is a hierarchy on knowledge, which makes sense. But it seems like even the vice admirals are kind of confused and taken aback. So it goes, like, top tier. Like, some of this knowledge is only for maybe just Fleet Admiral. I don't even know if the admirals know. But the Celestial Dragons is what's very interesting to me. You would think that they would know, because this is their history, this is what they come from, right? Because they brag about coming from the original 20 nations. But if that's really true, then why don't they know? They either... There's two theories here. It's either that they're lies... So what they know is a lie, right? They were like, hey, we actually were the good guys, and maybe they were the bad guys back then too. They don't know, but whatever they currently think are lies. Or just pride. Their pride is just too strong, and they can't accept anything, and they don't care. They just want their status, and that's it. And that's kind of what... I think it might be a little bit of a combination of both, honestly. But I think these are the two main points or ideas that might explain why some of the Celestial Dragons don't know. But what's really interesting is we do know the Celestial Dragons can change. We've seen it multiple times. Obviously with Dofi's parents. Dofi not so much, but with Dofi's parents. But also, the one that originally attacked Fishman Island during that arc, but we actually see and saved Shirahoshi during the Reverie arc. So we know that they can change. And what this implies, to me at least, is that she is now starting her character arc. That she is going to start questioning the regime that she has grew up in. That she is abused to the maximum. And she's going to start questioning whether she's right or wrong. All thanks to this message. Now, this has gotten very long, and there's going to be a lot of stuff. And like I said, if you really want to dive deep into this, join my Discord and we have a meaningful conversation with either VC or chat or whatever. You know, I'm going to be doing these videos where I'm going to keep going over and reviewing. But also go hear my thoughts and go talk about, if you want to talk about a specific chapter, go to that video. Most of the time, it's in there. If not, you can figure it out. Generally, it's always in the title, or the thumbnail. But I want to talk about Joy Bonnie. So I've seen a lot of controversy on this take, that how is Bonnie able to grab the strength? Now, I was planning on doing this episode for around like a week now, like catching up. It just so happened that just like yesterday or today, the Grand Line Review did a video that kind of talked about this. And the idea was, I think it was today, all the devil fruits that can go free. And I kind of like that idea. I didn't really read this until just the other day, and you know, like I said, I wait for his video to really start diving deep to process and, you know, reread it. But I think that's a really logical and decent idea, in a sense. Not where he's coming from. What he stated was they're gonna come from all the urge of freedom and just ways to get it. But I like the idea that there is two levels. So we got our Shikai, right, which is awakening. But then we also have our Bankai. And our Bankai is Gear 5. So, pretty much there's a second awakening. You awaken your Devil Fruit, you can affect the ground. But when you are truly in line with your Devil Fruit, and you truly understand, I think there's a chance that most Devil Fruits just unlock freedom. And the reason that we associate this with the Sun God, or Joy Boy, or whatever, is because he's the only person that has ever truly obtained true freedom in history. Because think about it. Roger, yes, he was king of the pirates, which is supposed to be the most free, and that's what Luffy wants to be, but he was condemned to death. He knew that he was dying, and he just wanted to reach the end. And then afterwards, he wanted to die. But he also didn't have a Devil Fruit, right? So, Luffy will be the most free and actually do something with that once he gets there, because he will have the Gomu Gomu no Mi, or whatever it's called, Maro Nika, you know, the human fruit. So I think there's a very real chance that it's just everyone's true. And because Bonnie, right, and their true freedom, Bonnie asked for a Nika-like future. However, all it did was give her some rubberish powers and a Gear 3rd like fist. She was strong and able to punch, but not quite Gear 5, the true Looney Tune. The only way she was able to do that is when she asked to be free. So I think there's a really real chance that that's just what it is. It's just everyone has this second form, and it just so happens that the awakening of the Gomu Gomu no Mi is that form. That's its base awakening. It doesn't have that second awakening, but everything can achieve that, but because that's its main awakening, it's just a little bit easier, and that's why that's the only one that has been awakened. So I have a lot more questions than answers, honestly. There's so much that has been revealed and so many questions that I want to ask. Just now is not the time. We're going to get the answers shortly. But this is kind of a little bit of a summary and a recap and an understanding of the points. Now there's more stuff that was missed. There is some very important reactions. And obviously there's progression of the Straw Hats being rescued. When I read the chapters, you can just go review that and skim through that. Or you can reread it coming up. Obviously, the anime is starting to catch up too. It's currently in Egghead. We had the original Gear 5 Luffy versus Lucci fight. That's around where we are, like a major point, so you guys can kind of keep track. But yeah, so I'm going to probably go react to that sometime this weekend, and I'll read the new chapter. But, yeah. So, again, if you guys want to talk more about this, join my Discord. I have an entire channel set up for discussions about this. But yeah, and later this week, I will be having the very first episode of One Piece, like, chronologically, which will be going over the Romance Dawn arc. But with that, thank you all for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, some of your theories, some of the things that you disagree or agree with me. I love to hear it. I'm Dr. Zombrain, your professor. Gotcha. Next episode of 101 Piece.